Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you a cool trick for how I run audio from Reaper to Harrison Mixbus and how you can use both DAWs at the same time. You may be wondering why I want to do this. First of all, it's because I wanted the Harrison sound and I love their workflow, but I like to do the initial stages of my work in Reaper, such as tracking, fixing and editing tracks, and do my mixing through Mixbus, because in Mixbus there is some real magic happening, especially with their EQ, their summing, and their saturation. It is also very common to use different programs for different reasons, or even to send stems to other engineers to mix through their analog gear, but there are a lot of people without all the analog gear and getting similar warmth and vibe with Mixbus alone. If you're a Reaper user and on the fence about using Mixbus, or haven't been able to fully make the switch, this video is for you, because what I'm about to show you is how you can seamlessly and very stably use both DAWs at the same time. And with this method there will no longer be any need to export stems, because whatever changes you make to the sound in one DAW will automatically be routed to the other. So let's get started. Right now I'm assuming that you already have Mixbus and Reaper installed. If you do, there are just a few things that you'll need to do to get started. First, in Reaper you will need to have RiaRoute installed. RiaRoute allows you to route audio to other ASIO applications, and it will be needed later. It is possible to use an application called Jack, but I find this to be a lot easier and more reliable for what I do, especially in Windows. Since RiaRoute does not come installed by default, you will likely need to get it added if you haven't done so already. To do this, just rerun your Reaper installer, and when you get to the Choose Components screen, expand the Optional Functionality section, then check the box to install the RiaRoute ASIO driver, and then finish the installation and open your Reaper session. For this demonstration, I created a simplified and mostly unprocessed version for a song I'm working on with a band called Sonic Defiance. To keep it simple, I exported only the buses from the original session and created this project file so I can show how all of this works. Next, open Mixbus. In the Audio MIDI setup window, make sure Port Audio is selected as the audio system. ASIO is set for the driver, and RiaRoute is selected for both the input and output device, and adjust any other settings as needed. Click Start and then it will take a moment to get fired up. When it says Stop Here and Running Here, you will know that it is running. Make sure to click OK and then your session will open. Again, to save time, I have already created a session in Mixbus, but all you will need to do at this stage is add the same number of tracks in Mixbus as you plan to send out from Reaper. For example, if you plan on sending buses from Reaper, and let's say you have 5 buses, one for drums, guitars, lead guitars, bass vocals, and so on, you will want to create 5 tracks in Mixbus for them to be routed to. Next, with Reaper open, we will want to route the audio into Mixbus. The way to do this is by first making sure there are no tracks or buses going to the master channel in Reaper at this point, even though before you got to this stage you would normally have specific tracks going to the master during your initial editing and tracking, but at this stage you will no longer want to do that. So from here, we are just going to click on the routing for our track or bus, then add new hardware output. Again, make sure nothing is going to your master send at this point. Then choose one of the RiaRoute outputs. For stereo tracks or buses, you're usually going to want to do this in pairs. For example, if you choose RiaRoute 1 and 2 for one stereo track, for the next track or bus, you will want to choose RiaRoute 3 and 4, but feel free to adjust accordingly for your project's needs, or if you are dealing with mono tracks. But for now, we're going to continue with the routing. Next, we will go into Mixbus. Make sure to arm the tracks for recording and make sure the input monitoring is turned on in this area. You will likely not be recording any audio, but you will need to follow these steps so that you can hear sound coming in. Next, click below to select your input. The input on your Mixbus track will be the same as the hardware output that you selected in Reaper for each of the corresponding tracks for each of the instruments. Once you have done that, select which bus inside of Mixbus you would like to send your audio to. Also, unless you plan on doing parallel processing with your tracks and buses, you should unassign tracks from the master send so they're going straight to the bus, then to the master. And the reasons you want to go from track to bus rather than just track to master is for a few reasons. One, the EQ on the tracks and buses do behave a little different. As an example, the EQ on the track can be used pretty aggressively, but the EQ on the bus is a little more wide and subtle. And the bus is where you can control your first stage of saturation with the drive knob here. Next, continue to set up the routing for your tracks and buses from Reaper to Mixbus. Once you have all of that set up, your audio should be coming from Reaper into Mixbus. You may notice at this point that you cannot hear anything, so there will just be one more step, and that is sending the Mixbus master to a final track in Reaper. There are other methods, but this is the way that I prefer. In Mixbus, on the master channel, click to choose your output. This would typically go to your playback device, but in this case we want to send it back to Reaper first. So just click near the bottom of the master channel for your output, and choose an output that has not been used. Usually I just select the last set to keep it simple. Next, go back into Reaper and set up your track. We will call this track Mixbus, or whatever you'd like. Then choose your input, just like you would choose your input device for recording, but this time choose the same output that you selected in the Mixbus master section. Make sure to arm this track for recording and turn on input monitoring as well so you can hear what is being played. At this stage, it is also a good idea to check to see that this is the only track armed for recording in Reaper. Otherwise, you might get duplicate audio in your other tracks. Now have fun with all of the magic of Mixbus. Usually what I like to do is get a rough mix, ideally with minimal or no plugins, then use Mixbus as a dedicated tool for all of my mixing. Doing this has sped up my workflow by a ton, and I have been able to get some great sounding mixes very fast. Now let's start playing with some audio. As you can see, whatever changes I make in one DAW will go to the other. If I add some EQ in Mixbus, that change in the sound is going to be routed to Reaper. The same would be for any compression, adding effects, etc. And the same is true the other way around. Whatever changes you make in Reaper will be applied to the audio before it is routed to Mixbus, whether it is an effect, new cuts in a track, envelopes, or adding MIDI tracks for virtual instruments, just about everything. If you made any changes, make sure to save in whatever DAW you made the changes in, or both. When you're all done with your mix, you can start recording your final track to your Mixbus track in Reaper. When you're all done, there is no need to do a final export. All you need to do is go to your session folder and search Mixbus, or whatever you named your Mixbus track, and it should be the only track in there, unless of course you have recorded a few tracks through the Mixbus track. Open your final track in your favorite mastering program for some final tweaks and trimming, and you should be all set. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out Mixbus and seeing what others have said about it, and give it a try for yourself. I hope you enjoyed this video, and now you should be able to get the best of both worlds with Harrison Mixbus. Thanks for watching.
Some things never change, but all the rest is past.